kept you waiting, huh?
Welcome to A Line Through Time, where I take the time to look through your favourite franchises and work out how it all lines up. I mean, given my username, you'd think I'd have covered this series much sooner. Crazy to think I did the poll in February, and I'm only now getting around to covering the series people actually voted for.
What took you so long?
It was a Phantom Pain style bait and switch, guys, honest. Only, it didn't cost you guys 40 fucking quid to experience. Anyway, I'll stop wasting your time now and get right into it. The Metal Gear franchise started 30 years ago today with Metal Gear for the MSX2, starring Michael Biehn as rookie Foxhound agent Solid Snake. No, really. Biehn wouldn't return to video games again until 2013's smash hit Aliens Colonial Marines, a decision he would no doubt regret instantly. The story of Metal Gear sees Superman's quest for peace come to fruition as the whole world discards its nuclear weapons, but then a terrorist group shows up with a nuclear-equipped walking tank and it's like, oh no! So Foxhound Commander Sean Connery sends Snake into the terrorist stronghold of Outer Heaven to rescue his comrade Grey Fox and eliminate the tank, the TX-55 Metal Gear. It turns out Sean Connery, aka Big Boss, was the mastermind all along, and Snake guns him down and legs it before the facility self-destructs or gets bombed by NATO. It's not really clear anymore. The series is actually really good about keeping dates to an obsessive degree, so we know that this game takes place in 1995. After an infamously bad NES port of Metal Gear that made players feel asleep and didn't even feature the titular mech, Konami commissioned a sequel to the NES port without director Hideo Kojima's involvement. The game was simply titled Snake's Revenge for reasons that continue to elude the world of science. In Snake's Revenge, 3 years on from MG NES, Snake has transformed into Arnold Schwarzenegger, and Big Boss is a big dumb robot now with a literal Achilles heel. The game's kinda remembered as a joke today, while its predecessor is remembered as a meme. The story goes that Kojima met a member of the Snake's Revenge dev team on the train in Tokyo. This person requested Kojima to make a proper sequel, and he had a concept planned out by the time he disembarked. Thus, the true sequel, Metal Gear 2 Solid Snake, released the same year in 1990, though it wouldn't see release in the West until 2006, because Konami is Konami. Set in 1999, MG2 sees Colonel Roy Campbell send Snake into Zanzibar land to deal with a new Metal Gear. Metal Gear D. No one knows what the D stands for.
D! It stands for D! D-E-E! This party's getting crazy!
It turns out that Big Boss is back and Grey Fox is working for him. Snake knocks Fox onto a landmine and sets Big Boss on fire with a makeshift flamethrower.
Man, that's pretty f***ed up, yo. Pretty f***ed up, Joey.
And that was it for this weird little stealth series, aside from a cameo in Kojima's later game Snatcher. Then in 1998, often considered the best year in gaming, Kojima brought the series back with a vengeance as Metal Gear Solid on the PlayStation, later remade as the Twin Snakes on the GameCube. The game revolutionized storytelling in games, made Solid Snake an icon, made voice actor David Hayter a household name, and popularized the idea of stealth games. The name is a reference to both Solid Snake and to the series now being in 3D. Set in 2005, Solid reveals that Snake retired to Alaska after the last game. Snake is brought out of retirement for one last mission to stop the rogue Foxhound unit led by Liquid Snake. Liquid reveals himself to be Snake's brother, no shit, and that the two are clones of Big Boss created in the 1970s, later established as 72. Also introduced here are Snake's best friend Otacon, an anime nerd who builds a nuclear-capable Metal Gear Rex for the sake of peace, Campbell's niece Meryl, who is actually his daughter from fucking his brother's wife, Revolver Ocelot, Madman series regular who suffers from chronic backstabbing disorder, and Grey Fox, back from the dead as a cyborg ninja. He dies again. With Solid's huge success, a sequel was inevitable, but Kojima decided to do something different.
What do you think you're doing, Snake?
While Kojima was hard at work on MGS2, Shinta Nojiri, assistant director on Kojima's other game Policenauts, headed up a Game Boy Color spin-off for release in 2000. Ghost Babel, known as simply Metal Gear Solid in the West, plays like the MSX games with some additions from Solid. The plot is non-canon and set several years after MG1, with Snake coming out of retirement to deal with the new Metal Gear. The Black Chamber boss squad is oddly kinda well remembered, but that's as far as Ghost Babel's legacy goes. 2001's Metal Gear Solid 2 Sons of Liberty is split into 2 chapters, the tanker and the plant. The tanker was the only part shown in marketing materials to hide the fact that after an hour or so on the tanker, the game jumps forward 2 years to the plant with an entirely different main character, Raiden, who was used as part of this big meta commentary about the nature of sequels that took about a decade for people to decipher. And people were not happy about the bait and switch. History repeats itself, I guess. The tanker chapter is set in 2007 with Snake infiltrating a tanker to find evidence that the Marine Corps has built their own Metal Gear, Ray. Ocelot, who lost a hand in MGS1, turns up with Liquid's arm attached, which allows Liquid to possess his body. Because science. The tanker sinks and Snake is presumed dead. The plant, set in 2009, takes place on an oil refinery erected to clean up the oil spill from the tanker as a cover-up for the construction of the new Metal Gear, Arsenal Gear. Raiden gets help from Snake to expose Ocelot as an agent of the Illuminati group The Patriots, and defeat former President Solidus Snake, the secret third clone of Big Boss. The two receive help from Olga Galukovich, this game's ninja, whose baby is being held captive by the Patriots. With the mystery of the Patriots and the goal of saving Olga's baby set up, it's only natural that the next game was a prequel set in 1964, Metal Gear Solid 3 Snake Eater from 2004, the other best year in gaming. There's some mention of a progenitor organisation to the Patriots called the Philosophers, but it's otherwise unrelated. This game follows a young Big Boss, here looking and sounding exactly like Solid Snake and going by the codename Naked Snake, because Kojima evidently learned the Solid Snake sex joke between games and took it too far. Generally the fan favourite, MGS3 explores Big Boss's relationship with his mentor turned enemy, the Boss, as well as how the government screwing them both over, coupled with being manipulated and used by his love interest Eva, sent him down his path to villainy. We also learn how he lost his eye and about his relationship with Ocelot. Don't ask. MGS3 has a wonderfully told story with a highly emotional climax which explains why it was recently remade as a gaudy pachinko machine. Because Konami is Konami. This was to be the last Metal Gear until Kojima received death threats from fans who, understandably, weren't happy with the storyline concluding with MGS2's mindfuck ending and cliffhanger. Later that year, another portable entry, Metal Gear Acid, released on the PSP. The card-focused gameplay is surprisingly good, while the non-canon plot is more convoluted than a Kojima-helmed entry, and that's saying something. Snake is once more brought out of retirement to deal with a new Metal Gear, and he goes through a weird identity crisis. Like, he thinks he was a scientist called Hans who experimented on a bunch of kids. It's weird. Despite being non-canon, the game set up quite a few plot points to be followed up on that sadly never were. Not because there wasn't a sequel, Acid 2 released the following year, but because the sequel story is barely connected to the first. Snake has amnesia, but then finds out he's actually a clone of Solid Snake and the real Snake died in the first game or something. The plot got really dumb in the sequel. A sign of things to come, perhaps? While Kojima began work on the next console game, another PSP entry was released in 2006, Metal Gear Solid Portable Ops. Unlike Ghost Babel and the Acid games though, Portable Ops plays like a console Metal Gear and is actually canonical. The game picks up in 1970 with a Big Boss who isn't quite over the death of the boss yet, so he still goes by Snake and continues to wear her bandana. Playing it safe, the story borrows heavily from MGS1 as Big Boss has to take down the rogue Fox unit and establish Fox Hound. The story is told via animated cutscenes drawn by Ashley Wood, who was the artist on the MGS1 and 2 comic adaptations by IDW Comics. Completely changed the structure of that sentence from how I wrote it in the scripts. What is wrong with me? Now, some fans think the game isn't canonical because of Kojima's response when he was asked directly about the game's canonical status, but it is canon. It's referenced directly in Peace Walker, guys. What I think Kojima meant was that the main story is canonical, but the optional stuff like recruiting MGS3 side characters or the Acid heroines isn't. You guys are misinterpreting Kojima's will. Huh. How meta. In 2008, the series finally ended with Metal Gear Solid 4 Guns of the Patriots. Yeah, it took 7 years to follow up on MGS2's sequel bait. It could have been worse though, they could have made us wait 8 years for an hour-long prologue to the next real story, Harada. MGS4 picks up in 2014 in a world where war has changed. A prematurely aged Snake, now known as Old Snake, is asked by Campbell to assassinate Liquid, who is now in full control of Ocelot's body. Snake learns that Big Boss, Ocelot, Eva, and the MGS3 comic relief radio crew were actually the Patriots, before most of them died, leading to an AI taking over. After Snake finishes off Liquid and contemplates suicide, Big Boss shows up looking fine and reveals that Liquid wasn't possessing Ocelot and it was nanomachines and hypnosis, but then the MGS4 database says he was possessing MGS2, but then did his bullshit to create a more controllable scenario to take down the Patriots because he was totally gay for Big Boss, and that Eva was Snake and Liquid's surrogate mother, so she and Big Boss did end up having kids sorted, and Raiden's a cyborg ninja now and saved Olga's kid between games, and Ramp isn't supernatural because he's nanomachines that let him survive being shot in the face multiple times, and...
Hey, Keith, you're a pirate, man.
That would explain everything.
Yeah, MGS4 was kind of a mess, but it was a very satisfying climax to a 20-year-old franchise, only it wasn't the climax actually. Despite what he'd said multiple times, Kojima still wasn't done with Metal Gear. He had one last story to tell with 2010's PSP release Metal Gear Solid Peace Walker, initially known as Metal Gear Solid 5. Set in 1974, Peace Walker follows Big Boss as he confronts the truth about the boss's death and begins to build his own private army alongside Master Miller, Ottocon's identical father, an evil lesbian who is totally from Manchester, a Parisian who can identify bird calls, and a 14-year-old girl who hijacks Big Boss's Metal Gear in her undies. Because Japan. It wasn't strictly necessary to expand on Big Boss's descent, but I think Kojima just really fell in love with the guy after MGS3 and couldn't bear to have him as an actual villain and wanted to make him into more of a well-intentioned extremist type. Around the same time, development began on a spin-off focused on riding between MGS2 and 4, Metal Gear Solid Rising. The team couldn't build levels around the incredible cutting mechanics, however, so Kojima moved development to Platinum Games. There, it became the 2013 madcap hack and slash Metal Gear Rising Revengeance, which is a real archaic word, by the way. MGR picked up in 2018, 4 years after MGS4, in a world where cybernetics took off after nanomachines were discontinued.
Nanomachines, son!
Mostly. MGR is among Platinum's best and is capped off with an insane final boss and a mind-blowing soundtrack. Some may argue Rising isn't canon, but there's nothing in the series to suggest it isn't, so I'm saying it is. Interestingly, the first entry in the series to receive any story DLC was the one where story is ultimately the least important. First was the Jetstream DLC, focused on the game's rival character, Jetstream Sam. This chapter is set in 2016, showing how Sam joined the villain faction Desperado. Second was Blade Wolf, following supporting character Blade Wolf between the first two chapters of the main game. As MGR was releasing, with Kojima's final story told, development was already underway on Metal Gear Solid 5, a Hideo Kojima game. MGS5 was built on the expensive new Fox engine and spent so many years in development that they ended up cutting off the prologue and selling it as a standalone release to scrounge up some extra funds. So the game was unveiled in two forms, Metal Gear Solid Ground Zeroes, and a totally unrelated game by a new studio that no one had ever heard of, and with a main character who looked just like Snake, only he was covered in bandages so you couldn't really tell. And this game was announced as The Phantom Pain, and it was kind of set up like a supernatural horror game set in a hospital. The internet being the internet though, it didn't take long for people to figure out what was going on. The Phantom Pain is actually the second half of MGS5. Metal Gear Solid 5 Ground Zeroes released in March 2014, a full 18 months ahead of Phantom Pain. In early 1975, Kiefer Sutherland, having finally embraced the Big Boss moniker, infiltrates Guantanamo Bay to save Paz and Chico from Peace Walker to keep his army secret safe. Then it turns out the two teens got raped by a guy named Skullface. Yeah, a guy who might as well be called fucking Skeletor forces a 13-year-old boy to rape his older crush who is presumably also underage as part of his interrogation to obtain information about a nuclear-equipped walking tank. Because Japan understands tone, apparently. Fucking Skeletor! As was revealed in early previews of MGS5, Ground Zeroes ends with MSF being destroyed and Big Boss falling into a coma. Thus, MGS5 The Phantom Pain picks up 9 years later as Big Boss, now going by the meme name of Punished Venom Snake, awakens from his coma with a horn and a missing arm and sets out for revenge, a word which is uttered approximately twice per line. After having about 5 minutes of screen time in a 60+ hour game, caps off with the most awkward one-sided conversation in all of gaming. Skullface just kinda dies unceremoniously without even a boss fight, and Venom is revealed to actually be the player's custom avatar as a brainwashed body double so Kojima could reference the player's role in the series even if it actively damages the canon. I'll try to contain my seething hatred until I give the game a proper critique. Beyond that, there's nothing else on the horizon for Metal Gear beyond Metal Gear Survive and Death by Pachinko. See, after MGS5, Kojima got booted and is now receiving undeserved hype for a game with no actual gameplay over a year and a half after its announcement because fucking video games. Metal Gear Survive is set to take MGS5's great gameplay into a non-canon spin-off where a surviving member of MSF gets sucked into a wormhole and has to fight off crystal zombies. I mean, MGS5's gameplay was about the only part people agreed was good, so more of that is always welcome. But Kojima isn't too down on zombies being added to Metal Gear despite putting them in MGS5 himself, the fucking tosser. But let's wrap up quickly before Konami announces Metal Gear Solid 6 exclusive for the Pachinko Entertainment System. So without further ado, the canonical Metal Gear timeline goes a little something like this. Circa 1922, the Joy is born. Circa 1935, John is born. 1942, the Cobra unit is formed to combat the Axis powers. Circa September 1943, the Joy becomes pregnant with the Sorrow's son, Adamska. June 6th, 1944. The Cobras take part in the Normandy landings. During the landings, the Joy gives birth to her son. The boy is taken by the philosophers to be trained as their agent, Ocelot. 1947. The Cobra unit is disbanded. The Joy later adopts the codename The Boss. 1950s. The Boss takes on John as her apprentice. June 12, 1959. The Boss leaves John to undertake a mission in Russia to assassinate the Sorrow. November 20th, 1962. The Cuban Missile Crisis comes to an end with one of Khrushchev's conditions being the return of the Russian scientist Nikolai Sokolov for the latter to construct the nuclear tank, the Shagohod. 1964. August 24th. The Boss undertakes a false defection mission to obtain the Philosopher's Legacy in Selinoyarsk, Russia. She is blamed for the detonation of a nuclear weapon on Russian soil by Colonel Volgin of GRU. August 30th. To clear its name, the American government sends John, under the codename Naked Snake, to assassinate his mentor. With help from alleged NSA operative Eva, Snake destroys the Shagohod and kills Volgin, the Cobras, and the Boss. Ocelot obtains a legacy for the CIA. After spending a night together, Snake learns the truth of the Boss's mission from Eva. President Johnson awards Snake the title of Big Boss. Disillusioned with his government, Snake retires from the Fox unit. November 1970. Big Boss infiltrates the San Geronimo Peninsula to take down the rogue Fox unit and prevent their nuclear strike against America. After Fox and their Metal Gear unit are eliminated, Major Zero disbands Fox. 1971. Big Boss forms the Foxhound unit and he, Zero, Ocelot, Eva, Dr. Clark and Donald Anderson reform the Philosopher's American branch into the Patriots. Big Boss is found to be sterile from exposure to radiation, prompting Zero to initiate the Les Enfants Terribles project to clone Big Boss. 1972. The project produces two successful clones, David and Eli. Upon discovering this, Big Boss leaves the organization and founds Militaires Sans Frontières with Kazuhiro Miller. The project later produces a third clone, George Sears. November 1974. Zero sends Pacifica Ocean under the alias Paz Ortega to infiltrate MSF. Big Boss is hired to put a stop to the Peace Walker project in Costa Rica. Along the way, Big Boss recruits Peace Walker's lead designer Huey Emmerich to design him a new Metal Gear, Zeke. In destroying Peace Walker and its AI based on the Boss, Big Boss comes to terms with his mentor's death. Paz then hijacks Zeke to kill Big Boss. After her defeat, she is ejected into the ocean and presumed dead. March 1975. Paz is rescued and captured by Skullface's XOF unit and imprisoned in the Camp Omega internment facility in Cuba. MSF's Chico infiltrates the facility to free Paz but is captured and tortured. Big Boss infiltrates the facility soon after and rescues them both. Big Boss returns to Mother Base only to find it destroyed by XOF. A bomb planted in Paz's body detonates, causing the helicopter to crash, leaving Big Boss, Miller and a medic as the sole survivors. Big Boss is left comatose. 1976. Zero is infected with the vocal cord parasite by Skullface, forcing him into hiding. 1977. Zero visits Big Boss in the hospital. He enacts a plan with Ocelot to turn the medic into a body double of Big Boss through extensive hypnotherapy and plastic surgery. Dubbed Venom Snake, Big Boss's phantom is placed into an artificial coma for the operation to begin. The parasite then reduces Zero into a permanent vegetative state, leaving control of the Patriots to the JD AI. Circa 1983. Jack is born in Liberia. March 1984. XOF attacks the hospital shortly after Venom awakens. Big Boss helps Venom escape the hospital where Ocelot guides him in creating a new army, Diamond Dogs. After eliminating Skullface and his Metal Gear Sahelanthropus, Venom remembers his true identity and begins colluding with the real Big Boss. Late 1980s. Venom creates a haven for soldiers known as Outer Heaven in South Africa. Jack's parents are murdered by George, who takes him in as a child soldier. Jack proves an efficient killer, earning the nickname Jack the Ripper. He is later taken in by the Patriots. 1995. David joins Foxhound where he is given the codename Solid Snake. Big Boss sends Snake into Outer Heaven to extract the captive Grey Fox and destroy Venom's TX-55 Metal Gear, expecting him to fail. Snake completes both objectives and kills Venom. Big Boss goes into hiding and Roy Campbell assumes command of Foxhound. December 24th, 1999. Big Boss resurfaces in Zanzibar land with Metal Gear D. Snake destroys the Metal Gear and seemingly kills Grey Fox in a minefield. Rendered weaponless, Snake creates a makeshift flamethrower and immolates Big Boss. Snake retires from Foxhound and begins living life in isolation in Alaska. Fox is taken by Dr. Clark and turned into a cyborg. Big Boss is left in a vegetative state and taken by the Patriots. Eva and Ocelot begin colluding against the other Patriots. 2000. Eli joins Foxhound as a squad leader under the codename Liquid Snake. Sometime later, George Sears is elected the 43rd President of the United States. 2003. Ocelot and Eva orchestrate the assassination of Dr. Clark by Grey Fox. Fox's sister, Naomi, begins plotting her revenge against Snake. 2005. Circa February 25th. Liquid stages an insurrection on Shadow Moses Island after being incited by Ocelot on George Sears' orders to obtain data on Metal Gear Rex. Ocelot murders Miller in his home and tortures Donald Anderson to death. February 28th. Campbell brings Snake out of retirement to eliminate Foxhound. Naomi injects Snake with the Foxdie virus programmed to infect and kill the entire Foxhound unit as well as Snake. Ocelot loses a hand to Fox, who is then crushed to death by Rex. Snake eliminates most of Foxhound and Liquid is killed by Foxdie. Ocelot escapes with the data and has Liquid's arm transplanted onto his body. The Patriots attempt to assassinate Sears, who goes into hiding under the codename Solidus Snake. Snake, alongside Rex designer Hal Otacon Emmerich, forms the anti-Metal Gear NGO, Philanthropy. August 8th, 2007. Snake infiltrates a tanker on the Hudson River to find evidence of the Navy's Metal Gear Ray. Ocelot hijacks Ray for the Patriots and sinks the tanker. Snake is blamed for the incident and presumed dead. The Patriots sink an oil tanker in the same location to justify construction of the Big Shell cleanup facility as a front for the construction of Arsenal Gear. April 29th, 2009. Solidus leads the Dead Cell unit to seize the Big Shell to obtain data on the Patriots. The Patriots send Jack into the Big Shell under the codename Raiden and use Ocelot to manipulate events to match those of Shadow Moses as part of the S3 plan. Raiden receives assistance from Olga Galukovich and Snake as he defeats Dead Cell. Olga is killed by Solidus and Arsenal Gear crashes into New York City where Raiden cuts Solidus down. Ocelot replaces Liquid's arm with a prosthetic and implants an artificial Liquid persona into his mind. Early 2010s. Raiden's son John is born. Raiden becomes a cyborg and saves Olga's daughter Sonny from the Patriots, leaving her in the care of Snake and Otacon. A defect in the cloning process causes Snake to begin aging rapidly. 2014. Liquid Ocelot stages an insurrection to seize control of the Patriots' SOP system. Snake and his allies put a stop to Ocelot's plan and eliminate the Patriots' AI system with a computer virus. Eva and Ocelot are both killed by Foxdie. A recovered Big Boss appears before Snake to explain Ocelot's plan and euthanize Zero before succumbing to Foxdie as well. The fallout of the SOP incident leads society away from nanotechnology and towards cybernetics. Raiden joins Maverick Security Consulting Incorporated. Circa 2015. Solid Snake dies of old age. 2016. Samuel Rodriguez attacks World Marshal HQ to assassinate Senator Stephen Armstrong. Armstrong severs Sam's arm and forces him to join Desperado LLC. 2018. Desperado assassinates a VIP under Maverick's care. Raiden hunts them down and eliminates each member, eventually stopping Armstrong's plan to assassinate the president. Raiden leaves Maverick to fight injustice on his own terms. And that, my friends, is Metal Gear as it exists 30 years on. I suppose after all this time I just need to hope the video isn't a massive disappointment after you guys had to wait such a long time for it. You know, like Phantom Pain.
That was perfect.
Yes, I think the video went quite well. Hopefully people will like it, if not, well... No, I don't think that'll be necessary. It doesn't look like the series story is going to continue anytime soon. True, I suppose someday I may revisit the series, but for now, there's not really any point. No, I don't think they suspect a thing. After all, I think if I can trick people into thinking I hate MK 2011, I can probably make them believe anything I want. Of course, no one will know about our connection. I'll make sure of that. I'll keep you informed as we proceed. Until next time, President Kozuki.
Did you like it?